new iPhone 14 Pro. I've had the 12 Pro Max for a couple of years now. After the release of 14 Pro and especially the big camera upgrades this year, I wanted to check it out and see if I wanted to upgrade my 12 Pro Max to the 14 Pro. So I got the 14 Pro and I'll test it out against my 12 Pro Max to see if the feature upgrades in 14 Pro make sense to me. If not, this is going back. Let's find out. Before we begin, I was clear on one thing. These phones starts at $1,000. It sells for almost 1,30,000 in Indian rupees. So I'm not gonna upgrade for just a new color or a camera upgrade, which requires me to zoom to 300% on a photo to notice a difference. It has to make a real difference for me. Let's see if the iPhone 14 Pro does that. First thing I noticed was that the box was super minimal. Apple wanted to reduce carbon emission. So as a part of that, the box is super thin and there is no plastic wrap. There is also no charger in the box and even the information brochure has shrunk. I got the deep purple color iPhone 14 Pro with 256 gigs of storage. My initial reaction was, the design is very similar to my 12 Pro Max. The 14 Pro felt familiar in my hand. Sadly, even after spending like $1,000. I'm not getting the new phone vibe. Then I started to notice the small differences between them. The camera module is much bigger than the 12 Pro. It also protrudes out much more than the 12, so if you keep it on a desk, it might wobble a bit more. And in the front, the notch is different. On the 12 Pro, the Face ID, all its sensors, the speakers and the front camera are all tucked in this notch up top. But on the 14 Pro, they have shrunk the Face ID component and brought it down. If you compare them side by side, you can see the size difference. Honestly, I prefer the notch over the pill-shaped cutout, which Apple is calling the dynamic island. The notch doesn't distract me much, and the content I'm watching never felt like being obstructed. But on the 14 Pro, the cutout feels in the way of my content, especially in bright backgrounds or viewing in full screen. There are some nice animations on this cutout. For example, if there is a timer running, you can see live timer on the top rather than in the notification. Or any other live notification will always be seen on this island. It's nice to have and one less swipe from the notification, but I still prefer the notch. The 14 Pro display has a high refresh rate screen, meaning the screen content will refresh much faster at 120 times a second. So using the screen like swiping and apps opening feels more fluid and responsive. My 12 Pro Max doesn't have a high refresh rate display, so it's noticeable difference for me and I like it. One more thing I noticed was that the 14 Pro screen can get much brighter in outdoor sunlight. I have been in situations where in bright sunlight, I increase my phone brightness to full and still have difficulty seeing the screen. In 14 Pro, the screen is very viewable even in those bright situations. There is also this new always on display where you lock your phone, the display doesn't turn off fully. Instead, it just dims down and the lock screen and the time and other notifications are still visible. It'll turn off if you put it in your pocket or face down, but otherwise it will still always be on. This does have some impact on my battery life, but not too much. Personally, I like how Android's always on displays are. It's just the time and some basic notifications rather than the entire screen being on. I get a feeling that I haven't locked my device and keep checking it. You can turn it off in the settings if you want. Regarding the performance, though the processor inside the 14 Pro is 2 years newer generation, I don't see much difference in my everyday use. I don't play games. The most demanding task on my phone is I edit photos on Lightroom. For that, the 12 Pro Max and 14 Pro work very similarly. So again, not something I would spend my money to upgrade on. I'll compare the cameras next on the iPhone 14 Pro and 12 Pro Max. This is an important category for me. As you can see, I have taken around 50,000 photos and a good camera upgrade would get me really excited. Before we get into the camera quality itself, let's see the features which aren't available in 12 Pro Max. First is the cinematic video. Cinematic video is the portrait mode for videos. You get this nice background blur in videos. 12 Pro Max doesn't have this feature. As soon as I started using this feature, I really liked it. This feature is available on the 13 Pro as well. You can shoot at 4K resolution on 14 Pro, but only at 1080p on 13 Pro. It makes a really huge difference to my videos and looks natural too. Next is the action mode. This is a video stabilization feature available on the 14 Pro, but not on the 12 Pro Max. Here's a comparison between the 12 Pro Max and 14 Pro without the action mode turned on, where I'm walking at a normal pace. Pretty similar, right? Not a whole lot of difference. Now, this is also without action mode, but I'm running. There is already a great difference. The 14 Pro is supposed to have better stabilization by default and it shows. photos. But here's a clip with action mode turned on and me running. Wow, it looks like the phone was on a gimbal or tripod. Very steady. I really like this feature. The macro photos on the 14 Pro also looks very nice. It can get much closer to the subject. I don't shoot much macro photos, so this is not something I'm very excited about. Okay, let's see how the main camera looks in day-to-day situations. I took many photos side by side to compare them both. Honestly, they turned out very similar. I was expecting to see a much bigger difference with a larger 48 megapixel camera, but you have to really zoom it in like 4 times to see the difference. The difference is definitely there. The photos are sharper on the 14 Pro, especially where the shot is very difficult. For example, if there is a moving subject, or if the light is less, or if there is deep shadows and bright highlights. In such cases, if you really look for it, you can see the photos are a bit cleaner and sharper. But if I take 10 photos, 2 photos will have difference and you will have to look for it. Low light photos can really show a difference, but like I said, it's just 2 out of 10 photos for me. If you are someone who takes a lot of low light and nighttime photos, you might appreciate the camera a bit more. One more thing I noticed is that my 12 Pro Max has only 3 zoom modes: 0.5x ultra wide, 1x, 2.5x. But on 14 Pro, there is 0.5x, 1x, 2x and 3x. This has come in handy a few times than the 48 megapixel itself. Overall, regarding the camera, I'm enjoying the features like action mode, additional zoom options and cinematic mode more than the 48 megapixel resolution or sharper photos. Okay, so these are the major differences I'm seeing between the 12 Pro Max and the 14 Pro. So, am I going to upgrade? No. The cinematic and action mode, camera upgrades, the smaller notch, slightly better display are all very nice. But in my opinion, these upgrades are not worth the $1,000. At the end of the day, in normal situations, it still feels like I'm using my old phone. Only rarely, once in a while, do I get to use these new features, which does not justify a $1,000 price tag. At least a newer design would have made me feel like I'm using a new phone for some time. But in the end, this is going back. I'm going to stick with my reliable 12 Pro Max. Apple might upgrade their iPhone design next year and maybe the iPhone 15 will feel like a substantial upgrade for me. What do you think? Was it a correct decision? Please let me know in the comments below. One more thing. I didn't go over every feature and upgrades in the 14 Pro. For example, the eSIM, crash detection, satellite connectivity, front-facing camera, etc. I just covered the big features which matter to me in this video. But I already made a video about all the features about the iPhone 14 lineup and will link it in the description below. Please check it out. But if you're considering between iPhone 14 and 14 Pro, stay away from the 14. I'll tell you why in the next video. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already to get more updates. Also, let me know in the comments below if you would like to see a detailed camera comparison between the two phones. See you in the next one. This is Anjana. Bye-bye.